Everybody, welcome back to another episode of Warriors Off-Road. Today we're going to talk about the steering box. Yeah, this little beauty right here. So at one point you might or might not have a problem with this where it breaks while you're out on the trail, off-roading, having some fun and so forth. We're going to show you how to replace this and some of the things that happen and why these fail sometimes. So stand by, get your tools out, and let's find out how to replace your steering box. Now in the steering box, it comes apart. There's really only two gears inside of here. So one is called the fan. This is called your fan, and that's your gear. So, and as you spin this comes off your steering shaft. This goes onto your tie rod connections. So as it rotates back and forth, it turns the gear, which in turn rotates this shaft. So what happens? This one's actually bent too. That's why we're using it. That's what it looks like inside. Nothing high tech, nothing whiz bang. So this is the gear that actually rotates, but it's typically the fan, what we call the internal gears on the fan. This is what breaks. Problem is that they don't sell just this part. They used to years ago, and they just don't. It'd be nice just to have this and this one gear inside of here. Call it a day. But they brought down the price of the boxes a little bit to help out. So basically, you just buy a whole new gearbox. So that's how that works. So what we're going to do is we're going to show you how to replace the gearbox by taking one out of here and put it back together. So let's see how we get this started. Come on. Alright, so the first thing we're going to start off, we're going to remove the wheels. I've already taken the lug nuts off. So we're going to remove these and set them aside. Now we're going to show you how to get in here, and we're going to how to start prepping to get this out of here. Alright, so one of the first things we're going to do is we're going to remove the tie rods. Now, we're not going to alter the toe-in adjustment or the alignment adjustment. We're simply going to move these out of the way so we can access your steering box, which is located in here. It's kind of difficult to get to. So what we want to do is remove this cotter pin, take the castle nut off. Now sometimes these will come right off, but if they don't, bring the castle nut a little bit back to protect the threads. And I'll just give it a little tap. You see it came right off. So we'll finish that. Pull it off. Boom. There you go. Now I'm going to reuse a cotter, or I'm not going to reuse that cotter pin. You always want to put a new one on. But I'm going to put the castle nut on here and protect the threads while it sits off to the side. So where the tie rods go to, it connects to a plate inside of here. Now on that plate, it's mounted to the steering box. There's a 10mm bolt that we need to pull out. So we're going to pull this bolt out, and we're going to leave these tie rod inner ones connected. We're just going to pull that plate off the shaft. One of the things you might come across is when you remove this bolt, you might look at the bolt itself. It's not of the best quality, and sometimes it's been known to have some issues with it. So we recommend always replace this with a much higher quality bolt. It's an 8x125 thread, and the length, let me see here, so the size of the bolt we use is an 8x125, and it's 35mm long. So try and use a bolt with better threads on there. So we've removed both of the outer tie rods from their collective spots on the outside. We have not done anything to adjust the dimensions here for the steering. All we've done is remove that. So now we're going to slide that shaft off. Let's see here. Alright, so now we're going to take a little pry bar maybe and come off that shaft. Let's see here.
There we go. So we're going to go back and forth. Alright, now we're going to walk this off the shaft. It's got splines on there, so it's just coming off there. Sometimes they come right off and sometimes they don't. There you go. We just took it right off. Now, we can leave this loose inside of here. Okay? So we don't need to take it out. You can if you want to. It gives you a good idea what it looks like. Or you can leave it in there. So, let's take this out. And put it off to the side. Alright, now we're going to work on, there's a bolt holding the steering shaft onto the steering box itself. So the same thing applies. We're going to take that bolt out there. We're going to inspect the bolt. If it's of poor quality, we're going to replace it. And then there's going to be 3 bolts holding the box onto the frame. Let's get started. So I've removed the bolt holding the knuckle onto the steering box. Now I'm going to remove these 3 bolts that hold the box onto the frame. Alright, so I've removed the 3 bolts that hold the steering box to the frame. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide this up towards the winch area. I've removed the winch to make it easier to see. And as you do so, that steering knuckle joint will come off the steering box. And there we go. It's out. Not too hard, huh? So you can see too, if I spin this one, this is where the steering shaft goes on. You can see that's the steering knuckle. It doesn't spin that much. So we'll make sure when we set this, and I'll show you how to do that right now before we put it in. So now we got the new box. This one's obviously the same one, but we're going to pretend this is a brand new box, and we're going to ready to install it. So again, I've made a little mark here with a Sharpie so you can see what happens. See a little arrow? So as I turn this one will mimic the steering wheel. Now watch that shaft. It doesn't turn very much in either direction, right? So what I want to do is I want to find both sides of it. And so we're going to erase that mark there. We're going to create a new one. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the center of this. So I'm going to use this and this as my reference points. These 2 points here. So I'm going to go turn this all the way to one way. Come up here and make a reference. I'm going to come all the way the other way. And it lines up there. So that tells me, so see if you can get that. So I'll turn it all the way one way and it lines up pretty good with this right here. Close enough. Then I'm going to turn it the other way and it almost lines up perfectly with that. So that tells me that mark should be pointing straight dead center. That tells me I got the steering box centered before I even put it in. So see that again? One more time. I made a mark. So what I did was I turned this all the way to one way and I used this mark right here and lined it up with a Sharpie mark. And I go all the way the other way and you can see it lines up here with this mark. So that tells me when I put it in the center, I should be right in the middle, right there. There's my center mark. So that tells me this is now centered too. So when I put this back in and I put the steering on there, I'm going to make sure the steering wheel is centered. So I might have somebody up there hold it in the center. So what we're going to do is we're going to slide this back in here. Okay. And then we're going to make sure that the steering wheel is centered, which I can see from here. Okay. We're going to put this back on the shaft. And it should be, there we go, it should be centered. Okay, so now I can go ahead and put the 3 bolts back in here. And we'll start with that, and then once we get this tightened up, we'll put the tie rods back in and we'll check alignment. Alright, so we've tightened the 3 bolts that hold the steering box onto the frame. I've kept this steering a little loose here. Now it's time for me to put the bolt in for the steering knuckle that goes in from the steering shaft onto the steering box. Now we've got the steering box bolted to the frame with the 3 bolts from underneath. Now we're going to take that steering knuckle that we removed and we're going to put the bolt back in there. Remember again, inspect the threads on the bolt. If they're poor quality, put a good quality bolt in here. It's 8 by 125 threads. So let's do that. Okay, so get that in there. There we go. I'm going to tighten it down with my trusty dusty wrench. the other side. There we go. All right. Now we got that tight. Now it's time to put our steering back in. Our steering knuckle, I should say. And you're going to see this bad boy right here. Let's bring it down. So it's going to go in the system just like this. The inner tie rods are going to face down. Outside they face up. So they're opposite. So down. So we know that this goes with a plate just like this behind there. So we're going to feed it back through there. There we go. Just like it was before. Okay. Alright, before I put it on, I'm going to make sure my steering wheel is straight, so I'm going to double check that. It's not, so I got to turn it a little bit. There we go. And then I'm going to put this on there and try and put it as straight as I can. There we go. Now before I tighten that down, what I'm going to do is take both of these tie rods and just hand tighten them back in the knuckle so I can check the alignment. So I put the knuckles in, just hand tight into the steering knuckle onto the wheel. So the tie rods are just hand tight right now. Now I'm going to do the other side. Put this in. Alright, so we've got it hand tight. So now I can step back and I can check the alignment. I'm going to straighten the wheels up, make sure my steering wheel's straight. Yep. Go all the way here and all the way there. Looks pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and tighten that bolt down that holds that bracket onto the steering box. There we go. Alright, I'm going to tighten that down. Alright, so we've got everything installed here. I've gone ahead and tightened the bolt into the steering box for the steering thing, for the steering shaft. For the gearbox, for the tie rods, I've tightened my tie rods here. I've made sure my steering wheel is centered. And one thing I might do is I come back here and find a fixed point equal on both sides. And I'll just check the measurement and make sure we're the same. That tells me I'm dead on. I am dead on. Woohoo! I like it. Now, my friends, is how you change the steering box. Don't forget to put a new cotter pin every time you change your the tie rods here. Every time you change your, let's see if we get that here, on your tie rod ends, make sure you put a new cotter pin on your castle nuts every single time. This might be also a good time for you to take a look at our wheel spacers installed here. They're really nice. They really offset it because we got our lift kit put in, so we want to equalize. Since we've gone up 2 inches, we want to go out 2 inches. These things are beautiful. Very long, heavy duty studs that go on here. And they lock onto the stock studs really tight, and just durable, lightweight because they've been hollowed out here. These things have always just been a charm for us. I'd recommend getting a set anyways. Anything wider is going to be more stable regardless. So even if you don't have the lift kit, these things just make handling so much better. Alright, well that's how we replace the steering box. It's not that hard. You can do it in 15-20 minutes. If you're really having difficulties, and I've seen some frustrated moments where you might have to chase the threads out on the knuckles from the steering shaft, that the threads are really boogered out. Again, they're 8 by 125. Sometimes you can actually run a longer bolt in there and put a nut on the back if need be. But not too hard because remember, they're rotating right next to each other, so if it's too long, it'll interfere and you can't turn. So get that on there. You should have no problem putting it in. It's something you can easily do at home. If you have any more questions, contact us at warriorsoffroad.com. And you guys have a great day. Go riding.